Dunlop. Welcome to my studio here in Wilton, Connecticut. And we've got an exciting program today on a different type of subject. I'm excited to share it with you. And we're going to begin that sharing with a video right now. This is on the beach, backlit, contre-jour lighting. The camera is placed about 3 to 4 inches above the shells. So we get enormous foreshortening. And with that low light, you can see how it's piercing the shells and kind of illuminating them from behind and putting a little corona light around them for drama, and then shooting straight into the sun there. So you got the idea. It's at Silver Sand State Park. Okay, let's move on. So last week, if you were with me last week, we saw a shell painting on steel, which was multiple layers, and it has a kind of pastel aspect to it. The underpainting is in oil. If you're interested in it, you just have to go to the blog post. I blog posted on this process and subject this last week, so you can see what the underpainting looked like, and then you can see how I began with the top and then moved down. This has a softer aspect to it with pastels because that had been the palette that I constructed. Now I'm going to show you, we're going to move it to a hotter palette. Also, this is a raking light from the side. We have a little translucence because some of these things, some of the shells are backlit. But the next painting that I've been working on, and I'm still working on it, shows you the shells backlit, so they're more like stained glass windows, and we're seeing that experience that you saw in the video. So let me put this work on steel, which I call Shell Dance, and the next one I call Shell Fiesta, and you'll see why it's a fiesta, because I've pushed the colors up, they're hotter. So let's go to the Shell Fiesta that I'm working on now. There's a mariachi band playing right off here to the right. And here's an opportunity to see this glow backlighting, turning, with the coronas. And it's also more scumbled. So I'm doing a different kind of application of the paint. So I can move to the degradation of focus. So figure ground, these are more focused in the foreground and more diffused and less focused. We can see it all kind of evaporate into a texture, a pattern, but the pattern should be suggestive of how it's lit and consonant with the light that's moving through here. So we've gone from harder, sharper focus to very dissolved focus. This one has been underpainted with acrylics, and on the top, I started putting in the oils, some translucent, some not, and it's going through a number of stages. As I say, I was moving toward a shell fiesta away from the pastel shell dance, which I had first. Now you've got an idea of some of my ambitions for you today. I'll move this away over here. As I say, I move these. This one I'm putting up into the attic. You gotta wait until I come down from the attic. Yes. And here we come back. Okay. All right. Whoa, there's nothing here. Okay, so let's put something up here with regard to our subject. And that would be shells. The blog post covers some of this. As you can see here, we're going to go back. Shells have been so much a part of our history, and it's universal across the globe. So if you were in the native, with indigenous people 10,000 years ago, that's when we suspect humans moved to the Americas, across the Bering Strait, where there was a land bridge, and down. And they would have been also collecting shells, collecting the shell and using those shells as a part of their aesthetic system, their religious system, their cultural system. So especially discovering abalone and the beauty of that and its iridescence. So if you're looking at Kwakiutl or Haida, native Northwest That's up by, I think, Don, you're up in Seattle, if I'm right. That's up to the northwest, all the way up to Sitka. Those tribes in Alaska occupied that territory, and they would be using these shells. But if you were a coastal tribe, you absolutely used the shells. But then we noticed that those shells were traded deep inland. The Huron Nation had a complex trade program going across the Great Lakes, deep into Canada, and back out to the coast of New England. That would be used and exploited by French and other traders later. So now we're going to move from this global perspective and how shells have been a part of a mercantile system between groups. They could represent units of value. They were decorative. They were religious artifacts. Their reflectance and their colors have always attracted us. We still to this day, if I'm walking along the beach with my wife, Rebecca, who's operating both of the cameras with her headset right now. Again, hello, Rebecca. Thank you. We would see us scanning the beach for shells because we are attracted to sparkly bits. And so it was in 1627 when the Dutch East India Company and all of the Dutch traders, because the Netherlands were the locus of global trade at this time, and the 1500s and early 1600s, and all the way from China, Indonesia, Japan, back into India and back, they were bringing all of these objects and items of value, not just porcelain and fabrics, tapestries, etc., but they were also bringing back natural curiosities. And for them, that included shells. And those shells would be collected, and they'd be collected by artists among the merchants and others, so that they could paint them because of their exotic aspect. They weren't like the shells they'd seen in Northern Europe along the Zuider Zee. So here we can see, inside of Peter Claes's painting, there is, by the way, that's a turkey pie, and there is a turkey. Now, you'll, just for compositional sake, see this ewer, and now see the turkey? See how they do these complementary shapes to create balance? We're going up with the bread, slice, 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 slice. We're going up with the bowls, so that it all creates this wonderful arc with these flawed echoes of one another. Bump, bump. But right here is a plate of oysters, and he was getting to play with the iridescence inside the oysters. He would also get to play with the iridescence, not only on the glass and on the ewer, but in this nautilus cup. So this is a big nautilus shell, which has been positioned here, and it was perceived as very valuable because it came a long way to get here. So it was then put onto this armature, this stand of ornate gold, and into what looks like almost a baby cradle right here. It's a drinking cup. It's a nautilus drinking cup. Now that sort of shell and its biomorphic form, an exoskeleton created by a long ago deceased inhabitant, has been something that would intrigue us, not only for its pearlescence, not only for its iridescence, but also for its beautiful shape. And that kind of shape would continue to inspire and attract artists, and here we are in the 21st century with Ellen Gallagher. Now Ellen Gallagher is doing a mixed media piece with a nautilus shell, and she's using, it's called the Water Ecstatic series. She has a lot of works in this Water Ecstatic series, but I want you to know what she's using as a 21st century artist generating her piece. She's using pencil, oil, ink, watercolor, and plasticine to make the picture. Now we'll stay with these shells and organic shapes, and you can see there this shape is a beautiful design shape, and you can see now we're seeing the serpentine shape, and we're seeing reflections of iridescence both in the blues and the yellows, and some shells layered on the beach, as well as this is a bit of reflective kelp on the beach. This is a watercolor by Andrew Wyeth. Let's go a little further over here, back to, as I was saying, the northwest. And here are the abalone shells. There they are. And you can see that here Bill Martin, and this is from 1982, and this is a work on paper, gouache on paper. And he's just taken excised, because this is an aesthetic that didn't exist in 1627. And it was approaching, as it became more and more a part of the menu, and we can trace it. And here in 1940, 42, we have Andrew Wyeth coming in for a close-up of glittering detritus on the beach. Now it's 1982, and Bill Martin is coming in with these gouaches, and what he's done is he's excised through a photograph a section of the beach. There's still the idea of composition. We have the two wings, we have something over here. Everything is holding and creating this rotating idea around this, but it's subtle. But we feel the picture has been an excision from a larger body. It's also very close. It's also directly top down. These are novelties that occurred to artists through the venue of photography. And with photography, they started to expand the menu of possibilities for imaging, as you can see has happened. Boom to boom to boom. Now somebody I had an acquaintance with, because we were all printing at a place called Brandex in the 1980s, and maybe it was 90s too. Everybody was printing down there. Erte, Rosenquist, Frank Stella, and I had an edition, several editions being created in silkscreen there, but they did everything. And he was having silkscreen. These were complicated silkscreens. Mine were like 32 color silkscreens. Here, this was created by Richard Ciriani. Same year, 1982. He's taken these shells and fragments. He's not interested, so it's the interesting breakpoints. So we've got this beautiful curvature and then a breakpoint. So that creates another feeling of, fragility. So we're piling them up in a design, and you can see how this design is created by Richard, and he's using pastel pencils on paper to do this. He's a very careful artist. Now, I'm going to show you back to that picture that I called the Fiesta, and we're going to look here. This is Joan Erdley doing, take a look, standard seascape model. Complementary colors, which you can see are the kind of color program that I'm having in mind for myself. I'm going to go over these in just a second. But we've got this movement, this reflection, these complementary colors, the blues, yellows, and oranges, these almost maroonish reds, and then hit with some hot reds, and then they're high darks to light to dark, and complements. But watch the shape, watch the composition. Now, I'm going to take you back over here. I've got to go back to the attic for this. All right, come down from the attic, close the door, and bring back the Fiesta painting. I'm going to put this alongside Joan Erdley so you can see that I too am working from the Canon. It's the same Canon, but it's foreshortened, it's compressed. So here is this motion, here is the same motion, but compressed here and radically foreshortened. What's happened is we keep playing with the menu. What can you do to the apple pie? Well, we could put pears in the apple pie. We could put, what happens if you put cumin instead of nutmeg and cinnamon? Well, maybe. Well, you got to try it and see. You got to play with the food. And that's actually how we begin as painters. You and I began playing with the food. In my high chair, playing with the peas and the potatoes. And so when I would go back, invited as a visiting artist occasionally, let's say, I did have the luxury of this to 2 elementary schools years ago, I would bring with me a big bowl of pink mashed potatoes and another big bowl of cooked peas. Or were they frozen peas? I think they were just frozen. So I just had big bowls of each, and I dolloped out a mound of peas and a mound of mashed potatoes to everybody and said, have fun with the food, make something. And they were making airports and all kinds of zoos, everything with their peas and mashed potatoes, because I remember that's how I started, and that's what happens. It's a very visceral, very tactile experience, and we start playing there, inventing like we do with sand, and that's what we're doing. We want to take that attitude to the paint in our studios. Mashed potatoes and peas. We've got the composition. We'll put you back in the attic. So here we go. Open the attic door again, Rebecca. There, attic door closed. Good. And I'm back. Now let's go down here. And I have a pointer because, as Connie has pointed out, try not to let your hand block the view. Sorry, I forgot for a moment. That will happen to me. There. So we were here with Bill Martin's abalone excision of a small territory. By the way, that was the evolution of painting. So when Vermeer picks up his camera obscura, as opposed to Peter de Hooch only using it in parts to refocus his image, he composes his image with the camera obscura. And his paintings, Vermeer's paintings, look so modern because they're cropped like a photograph. And that's why one of the reasons they have a very powerful subliminal appeal, more than, let's say, some of the others at that time, like Peter de Hooch. Now we've gone from the pastel, and this is a standard classical composition, as you see here, except we're really close. Taking the idea of a close-up and going to the close-up laterally across. Now, I'm going to have you look at this photograph first. This is from the same place where I took that video. And here, I'm down low. I'm looking across directly into the sun, contre-jour lighting, so I can get the sunlight to pass through some shells. Now, if there is a shape that is taking too much attention, this one right here, this thumb sticking up, or this one. So we've got this peculiar cup shape riding on a sled. That takes so much attention away from the rest of the picture, I need to do something to it. What do I decide to do? There's the question. And you can do this in Photo Elements, which is a software program which you can buy online or from Staples or somewhere else. And Connie just bought it for $65 recently. I think that number's right, Connie, is it? Was it what you paid? $69. Okay. Now we've got, you can see this path of light. You can see it perforate and puncture the translucent, semi-translucent shell casings. Now we're going to go to this picture. It's the same photo, but this is all new information. So from a different shell picture, I cloned a pattern of shells so that I could break this shape up and still have them backlit because I had lots of photos. So here they are trying to dissolve and make this territory less focal. Then to take care of this and to hold on to this corner and to give us a sense of foreshortening, I need some bigger shapes in the front. So I can have you feel that they're closer, and then we're going to a middle distance and a far distance. So I clone in, as you can see here, some other bigger shapes. So I've cloned in here, I've cloned in these images here, they're backlit, the colorations are very consistent, and that allows me, through cloning, to create an image and suppress those territories which were stealing attention and spread and unify the rest of the picture and create a foreground which is closer than the foreground that already existed. So some of this composition, it's so much fun to do. The sketching itself, this is an aspect of sketching you do on the computer as well as, and of course that's what Vermeer and Canaletto and others would be doing with the camera obscura. They'd be composing and recomposing and looking at the image in their camera obscura and saying, well, how's that look? I think we need to put a Persian carpet over the table over there. All right, let's try that. Okay, good. Let's move it a little bit to the left. You're a little crooked on the right. You're a little, okay. And that's how they're going to be sketching with a camera obscura. They can keep making modifications in the paint, which they did. So curved lines that came as a result of the convex lens of the camera obscura, Vermeer would reimpose a linear perspective grid to straighten those out. We'll put this aside now and take a look at what our project, yours and mine, are today. Whoops. And let's see where we are. Let's go first here. I'm back at the beach. This time, our project will be to do a raking light coming across. Also, and I'm going to draw alongside it, I'm going to show you how this works. This is very big foreground, background, background. And when I do this 1, 2, 3 very big wide, and I'm sure I've shown you this before, but here we go. If I do it all equally, it's just a French flag. It's flat. We don't get depth perception. But somehow our brain is good at constructing space if it sees a pattern that is bigger here, smaller there, and smaller there. Now that triggers a sense of depth perception in the flat image that is missing here, even though they're both flat. So I've designed the picture with that in mind. Now when I go down to this picture right here, which is the same picture as this, except I've made some changes just to see what would happen. We're too close, I thought, and I'm going to draw again alongside. Here's the middle, and here's this water. So I think they're too close to the middle, this one, and I would like it to go up and extend this space. I love all the rolling clouds because they're metaphorically similar to some of these rolling shapes in the shells, the organic exoskeletons of the mollusks. So what I've got here is this much here, and then this much here. Suppose I change the ratio of this territory to this territory, and I do. And I do that in photo elements, and what I've done is I've by the way, I've also amplified the color contrast in all of these, so you can see this kind of blue, pale shadows, and then these very amber highlights. All of that has been our exaggerations. Setting up color contrast. Remember the Michel Chevreul's principles of harmony and contrast, and he discovers in double-blind focus groups in the 1820s and 30s that people in general prefer contrast through simultaneous contrast, through opposite colors. But this time I've taken this very picture, and there's a stretch. You put a marquee around your photograph, and you start which is a little dotted thing that goes around your photograph. It's a marquee tool, and I started pulling it up. So what had been down here, I just put it on the top of the little dotted line that was running around the photo, and I just pulled it, and I pulled it up. So these are the same elements, but look how stretched and how much bigger they are here. Do you see that? I'm going to look at this, see how tall it is. Now look at its relationship to the rest. See how they've all grown vertically. When they grew vertically, they did several things happened inside of the brain. One, this bar got thinner, so the expression of space could be deeper in terms of that design, because now we've got a design that is more like boom to boom, more big and less small. And that helps. And I kept some of the clouds, as you can see, but I excised these clouds in pulling up. They came out of the picture. But because these shapes in here are so much bigger, the idea of proximity, of foreshortening, is stronger. So these shapes feel closer because in the stretching, when I stretch the picture, they got bigger. And that makes them feel closer. The ones in the back still stay relatively small to the ones in the front, so the difference, the ratio of difference becomes more pronounced. And we don't see this as unreal. any more than we see this is real, but we see that the size has changed the perception of proximity. And that's purely psychological. Your cortex is doing all that work. Let's set this aside and see how we might address this as a painting. Seems exciting to me. Okay, here we go. Where are you? Today we're going to work on paper. A polymer gloss varnish sheet of paper. There it is, and I'm not even sure the size. That looks like about 13 by 18. Maybe it's 12 by 18. Thereabouts. 3 coats, 2 or 3 coats, I hope it's 3, of polymer gloss varnish on the Bristol paper, which you've been seeing me do, if you've seen me do other lessons. Okay, as opposed to, let's say, using the dye bond. By the way, I often ask, do you do any work on linen? I've been working on a 42 by 56 inch, very atmospheric painting, but until we set up the cameras, you would only be able to see a section because it's bigger than the foam core. And you can't get the foam core all in the lens when they're set up that far. So we'll figure something out about that. In the meantime, here we go. Pick up a pen, do a design. And I'm going up to that top image, this image. And before I do that, I'm going to pin my board so I have less wiggle. All right, less wiggle, please. Good. Maybe that'll be secure. We'll find out. Experience tells you. And I'm going to go a little more horizontal because I don't know, I made it too much of a square. Now, in this case, I have a very high horizon, and I have a choice. Do I want to give it a little bit of a hump in the middle, or do I want to give it a swale in the middle? I have 2 choices. The swale seems to suggest more space than the bump. I also have this idea of water, and now I'm going to push that water way up there, and so it's a thinner band of sky. So we have here is the water with its thickness. I'm going to go to a swale. So we'll do that. There's the swale. And the sky is even thinner than the band of where the water is, with something to hold this edge on, and that would be this little island over there. Maybe you want to put another island or 2 out here. You can play with all of those ideas. Now I go from big shapes up close, bigger shapes, to eventually much smaller shapes in the distance. And we can see how we're moving through. You can see as I shot this, I thought about this band, this pattern of light arcing across the picture and then holding on to the bottom of the picture in this corner. And then we can see how this moves across with some of the bigger light shapes coming in down in here and then moving back. Now there's a pattern of all of these violets and blues with the ambers interrupting. So we've got a pattern of interruptions. And how we treat that pattern of the luminous interruptions, and that's what's so much fun, there, you got the idea. Because what we're doing, your cortex is doing, is looking for patterns. Patterns. And from the recognition of a certain style of pattern, a pattern for depth, the pattern of each of the shells relative to the other shells, that we notice they have a range. There's nothing, I don't see a beer bottle. In other words, I don't see a can. So something that is super regularized. You could, but that will draw a lot of attention because it is a dissimilar. Remember, we pay attention to similars. So if I have a territory that has a lot of Even if they're bigger or smaller, they have similarity. But if in the middle of that I put a very different shape, your eye goes to the very different shape because it's a dissimilar. This is a part of the remarkable discoveries of Gestalt psychology early in the 20th century, and it's been confirmed many, many, many times, and it is now a fundamental design principle. Now we can take, so if I go to some even bigger ones, it doesn't matter, the triangle is the dissimilar. Now if I make them get smaller and smaller, these shapes, I connect them to the principle of both overlapping, so we're overlapping, and the principle of a gradient shift, a perspective gradient shift, bigger to smaller. And the smaller ones start dissolving and amalgamating into one another. So they start to fuse. We don't have the articulation that we have in the foreground. Good articulation, blended, diminished articulation. You can see it here. Now you can set up your camera to amplify that. And that has to do with your aperture opening in your camera. And you can see I exploited that idea in this Fiesta painting, the shell Fiesta. So we go from articulated edges and bigger shapes very rapidly to dissolve a fabric, a texture, a pattern that still is reminiscent of this, but it's much more unified, blended, and less articulated. Let me stand out of the way. In fact, I don't want to do what I've done before. Let me just, much more articulated here. And much more blended here. More of a sensation of scumbling. I wasn't scumbling, I'm just being loose. And the scale is coming down, but we're losing the acuity of the edges. All right? So now we've developed a cunning plan. And we're going to play with that. We're not going to do exactly what's there or there. We're going to see what could happen as we play with this subject matter. The colors, the textures, the patterns, they will be different. So don't hang everything on transcription. You'll be disappointed in the result because you haven't got tools that will do some of these things. They just don't, and your paint or your other things won't. So you come up with patterns and textures that can accommodate a suggestion like this. Remember, these aren't shells either. This is just the use of a high-quality lens on a single lens reflex camera, digital. Here we go. Now the question would be, how about a substrate? Should we put in some acrylic colors as you've seen me do before? And I say, no, no, no. I am not going to do that this time. I can hear Amy Winehouse, no, no, no. So instead we're going to go put out some colors and let me see where they are. Almost out of reach, that's convenient. Ultramarine blue, there we go. There you go, sweetie. Ultramarine blue. Old Holland French Light Extra. White. Yeah. Everything is oil. Oily. Huile, as the French say. Olio, as the Italians say. Right? We all have different words for all these things. And then we're going to go to the Gamboge, because that will give us this toasty light, which I'll put up here. And then we'll use a little lemon, because that makes a nice contrast with the ultramarine blue. So we'll put it up here by the other yellow. You want to be generous with these colors in the beginning so you're not inhibited in using them, going, oh, I'm using up a... And I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it now. Don't put up little buttons of color. Be generous. Love yourself. Paint is free. Colors, everything is free. And as long as you have that attitude, and you have an infinite amount of time, you have cosmic time, then you'll play. If you think and I've got a job to do at 11 or whatever, and I've got to get out of here, and I've got to, oh damn, these paints are expensive. I can't put up much of that because I don't want to waste it. Well, you're not going to experiment like that. You're not going to do well in the garden, in the kitchen. You're going to say, well, I think that's enough shrimp. No. If you're hosting a party, be generous. You don't want the people saying, you know, I'm so sorry, but wine was expensive and we only bought one bottle. No, be generous with your paint as you would be with your guests. Okay, now we've got some of that up. We'll put up some other colors. On Naphthol Red Deep, and we'll put up a couple of reds, and a Quinacridone Fuchsia, wherever you are. This looks like a Quinacridone Fuchsia. There it is. 2 reds, 2 yellows. Now we'll go to a couple of blues. We're going to want a blue that has some opacity to it, and that's where I really like this Scheveningen blue light. So we've got Quinacridone Fuchsia by Charvin Extra Fine, Naphthol Red Deep, Charvin Extra Fine, Lemon Yellow, Sennelier, Gamboge Yellow, and that is Old Holland. Last week somebody said, well, what else could you do if you can't get that? And I'm going to show you because I showed people on Saturday. Here is Gamblin's Hansa Yellow, which is not quite like this, but very close. And if I take a little bit of this, that's the Naphthol Red Deep. And because this is made of an aerolite color, or also diarylite color, and this is nickel azo and diarylite. So if I take this, it used to be the tree resin, and I take a little bit of that and mix it with this. Let's take a little bit less of it. I can get a pretty good match. So if you want to buy something like Gamblin's transparent yellow Hansa Yellow Light Extra, it's called Yellow Light, Hansa Yellow Light, H-A-N-S-A. There it is. There it is. Because you've been unable to find Gamboge, well, now you know you can do this. Isn't that ever so cool? All right. Ooh, I'm going to need another. The Scheveningen blue light tube is becoming exhausted. And we'll squirt out some Scheveningen blue light down here near the blue so we can mix all of that together. All right, now we'll go to the Bounty paper towels. And what do? You take a break. You relax. You get your arms, shoulders, all your joints, your breathing to relax. Slow down. You're not in any hurry. You are playing. Play, 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 play. Breathe. Relax. No hurry. Okay. Having done all that, we're going to now put in some color. Now, I don't have to put it in with a brush. I can put it in, as you've seen, I can put it in with some other tools. I may want to put it in and take some of this Naphthol red and this ultramarine blue and get a kind of a purple going, like that. And I think I'll just rub that in. I'm going to add a little oil to it, a teeny bit of refined linseed oil, and maybe a little bit more of that blue to it in places. And now I'm going to rub in patches of that Gamboge, or my invented Gamboge, in this case, the Gamboge, and see what happens. As I play. And I'm seeing if there's something here I think I could work with. I don't know yet. I'm going to go back to the darker colors. Dip into the linseed oil and go back to the darker colors. And play. Remember the mashed potatoes and the peas? The sandcastle? You're playing. So you can't make a mistake. You're just seeing what will happen.
And the lines are the creases.
Oh, that's the multi-directional lines of the polymer gloss varnish. Now, you'll notice they're going in multiple directions. That coated the paper. Now, if I put on heavier paper, they're less obvious. Because I'm putting on more paint, they become less obvious. But I curved them in these, I didn't just go circles or so, I curved them so that I would get patterns that would feel like, that would be consonant with the curves that I'm feeling in the shells. And that's even with the polymer gloss varnish that I would put down. What an excellent observation on the part of our crew, Connie. I'm going to put a little of the Scheveningen blue light. And a little bit more of that red. And let's see. I'm eavesdropping on your Hope it's all going well back there. I can kind of hear, and so I'm going to include you in on this. Connie and Rebecca are having a running conversation about the program and what to do with the cameras and what to do, etc. and other things. How to make a really fine apple pie. So I'm adding more color. You can see how I'm doing this with a certain, just playful testing of the color. And if I think I need a lot more juice, I'll either add more paint or I could add it with a brush. I can do this, but I wanted to see how it would look this way first. I'm going to rotate my paper towel and mix ultramarine blue into the Scheveningen blue light puddle right there. And we're going to go up here. And put that across there. Okay, there we go. Having some fun with that. And I don't want that swale to be centered, so I'm putting a little dip right there. Now I'm going to take some more of that and some more of that, because it makes a different kind of grade violet. There you can see it. And try putting that in and see what happens. So for all the painting has been done with a paper towel. All right. And we'll put in a kind of a glowing, bit of a yellowy pink sky at the base. There, you can see how I've mixed that. A little bit of coral in it, and I'm rolling that across there like that. Now, do I have enough paint? Or should I try? Because since these are experiments and we're just playing, we're seeing what will happen. When you would do this, you can say, well, do I have enough paint so when I excise it, let's say with a squeegee, I'm going to get interesting patterns, shell patterns. Or do I need to put more paint down? Do I need to put more paint down so that when I lift up, I'll have a higher degree of contrast? In other words, my darks will be darker. Maybe the paper towel wasn't giving me enough pigment for the surface. And I think that is the case. So having done all that, well, I think we just knocked over the Bing vase. Okay, having done all that, I'm going to take this new brush and go darker. And this brush and dark brush here, which are both 3-inch watercolor wash polar flow brushes. And I'm going to go much darker. I'm going to take this and heavier. So when I excise the color from it, I'm going to get a much more contrast. So now it's heavier. Because I wasn't getting enough contrast. That was my feeling. Whoop. Now I'm going to go to the reds. Ooh, look at that. I used up my Naphthol red. I'm going to have to find a new place for Mr. Naphthol red. There we go. So much for lids. And put that in here. Reds. Reds and yellows. Put them in. Let's be a little more vigorous with more impasto paint than I was in the first pass. I could have continued to do it, but I wasn't getting the contrast I wanted, so I've just decided I would do something else. And there you can see the result of me taking a new path with another technique, all on the beginning of this painting. And am I getting what a little more contrast this way? Yes. Now suppose I were to say in this early stage, I don't normally do it this way, I was blending the Gamboge yellow with the Naphthol red to get, and it wasn't blending it very much, so that the brush was still part Naphthol yellow, part an unmixed, well, a quasi-mixed, a semi-mixed color. So you can see they're kind of rainbows of color here. Not completely or thoroughly mixed. I wanted that accident. Next, we'll go to a brush. Let's go to a different brush. And I think I'm going to go to a much lighter brush. And that would be this one, which is another 3-inch. And go down into the white, this time making a pastel out of, take these colors we had, that Naphthol and red and Gamboge, and mix them together here. Maybe a little more than Naphthol. So I'm getting a pale pastel out of that. And I'm going to roll that, I'm going to turn my brush this way. More red, more amber, more Naphthol. And I'm just going to let it dance like that, back there. So we're going from strong color to pastel color in the back, with a little more of the Naphthol red. And you can see how we shifted the program to the pastel. Now I'm going to go to the top and get something that is much stronger contrast. And we'll get some fresh paper towel. you see how we're experiencing a field of texture and shapes and color, and it has an abstract aspect to it, but somehow it's associated with this program. We can associate it easily. This is how we move from abstraction to realism or naturalism and back. And we can keep moving to more and more naturalism through the whole process. So I'm going to just give a little more oil on this brush. And breathe. Relax. Step back. Take a look at what you're doing. There. Now we'll take this white brush, what was a white brush, move it over here, give it a little bit of oil, and more of the Scheveningen blue light, which we will mix in here. And now we'll cut some light right in here. So I can get a strong sense of contrast where all of this chaos is now having to relate to an even field color. So this is a flat field of undifferentiated color running in contrast to color contrast and texture contrast to this other color down here, the colors that are occupying the territory known to be where the shells live. And you can see that contrast, the color contrast, is helping you differentiate it just as much as the texture contrast. Now we're going to go deeper as we go up. So I'm going to put that light brush down and go up and go a little deeper, because we're building presence here by what we do there. Make something bigger by putting something smaller next to it. Make something bigger by putting something smaller next to it. Darker, lighter next to it. It's not what you do to the thing itself, it's what you do to the territory next to the thing you're trying to modify. In other words, do I want to make it look redder? Put blue next to it. Do I want it to make it look taller? Put something short next to it. Always think in the opposite way. Your brain's going to want to go, oh, we'll add more red. No, it's what you do in the contrast, because our brains and our system of perception depends on contrast and comparison. We do compare and contrast to tell us what and where things are. That's how you buy a house. You say, well, that's out of my price range. I'm comparing. On this, or this house seems like something that it is. I can compare it to my price possibilities and say, you're viable. Now I'm going to add a little more light to this color. You can see me mixing the ultramarine blue, the Scheveningen blue light, and white. And I test that on the side to see, because I'm going up with it gradually and leaving the darkest band for the top so that it can radiate up a little bit lighter, down lower, and then so we get that transition up to the top. More light, because it's mixing with the color. Remember, you're mixing with the color. And I want to get that top band to be even lighter so that it moves back. So it's thinner and moves back. And now it's blended, so it's a different kind of surface. The brain says, that's not the same as this. Remember what I said about comparing and contrasting. Similars or dissimilars? Dissimilar to this must be something else. That's how your brain makes conclusions. And it jumps to conclusions, which is great because you exploit that jumping to conclusion. Now I'm going to put something darker right on the far edge. I have to go and block you so that I keep it straight. I'm sorry for the blocking. And I'll blend that now from below. If I block, it's just because I have to keep it relatively straight, and that means I have to stand in the middle of a picture. I'm okay? Good. I know it's a feature of that happens, something that happens when I do that. It's not that I'm blithely unaware. Okay, we'll go back and get something that's a little oranger and test it a little deeper with a little bit of that violet on it and run it along the horizon to give us a sense, oh, there's how deep the place is. That's going back really far. One more dark strip along that edge. We'll go with an orange strip above it in just a moment to create a deeper blue. And I'll show you what I mean. That's with the color contrast. I'm going to again have to come in front of you and block your view when I come across to keep it relatively straight. I am so sorry. I will send you all letters of apology later. Is camera 2 picking it up? Good. There. Now you can see how that darker band is pulling you back. Now we'll put in the oranger color right on the edge, and that would be the sort of thing you would expect from Bonnard and Wayne Thiebaud and others who are consummate colorists. I'm going to go lift this edge up because it started to fall down. When I stood back, I could see that. All right, now, here we go. I'm going to take this brush and feed it some heat. Maybe I would like to really feed it more heat than I have on my palette, which means bright vermilion is being marshaled up. So I'm going to draft bright vermilion into the palette. Your number came up. Okay, and there we go. And we've got that nice bright, and we'll mix it with a little bit of the Gamboge. So it looks pretty orangey. More orange there than there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Bright vermilion mixed with a little Gamboge to push it away from the vermilion towards something that's a little more orange, which is a color complement to this blue. And we'll run a test. Now I might want to give it a little opacity as well. So I'm going to come down into here so it's not too strong, but it's certainly stronger than what's up there. And we'll ride on top of that color. Just to create a little hum. All right, we're going to ride on top of the color to try to create a little hum. And I have to stop because the color's getting dirty fast. Now we're going to ride on top of that color with an even, with a little more pastel color. We're going to use that yellow again, with a little more pastel in the coral nature of the color. But I can turn the brush this way now. So that we've got this glow, which is a different color in contrast. In other words, it's a complementary color. I'm going to go along, blur that out, move it back, so that the blue below it seems richer. Aha. Now we're getting this much more zipped up color. And the questions are, let's play with some of the patterns and shapes in here. Now we can do that with both brushes and squeegees and fingers and paper towels and lots of other fun tools that we have. That's why you have this diversity of tools. And you try not to walk on your diverse tools like I'm doing now. Relax. So at this point, I'm thinking, well, what happens if you sculpt with the brush? In other words, I plow with the brush and I find a sculpted pattern. I've got my finger on the brush to do the sculpting. And I'm not pulling up everything when I do this. I'm just pulling up some of the stuff. And if I were to use a squeegee, I'd be pulling up much more. Let's see what happens. It's a 4-inch wide squeegee that has been cut down from a larger squeegee, either Unger or Ator, and this is the Ator Pro Series. Pro means fit for you, because you are pros. And then you don't need to add the wooden handle, because you're going to hold it in your palm. And then you're going to get a hacksaw and cut it down if you want to cut it down, or you just have a great variety. Some are bigger, some are shorter, some are much bigger and much shorter depending on what you want to use. So we have diversity in our squeegees. It's from the HR office where we want diversity and inclusion in the squeegees. And so you can see how much the squeegee takes out. It takes out an enormous amount. But that doesn't mean you can't use it. You can't just go try some other things, or you can try to keep it soft and roll out some possibilities. And you're seeing what the shapes will do with the squeegee. You can do this with the brush too. We'll go back and amend things with the brush. Go for some overlapping. Come in from the other side. And not lift and not press as hard to get some other kinds of activity going on. Try to be aware that you're not creating faces, because that happens whenever you do this. Just be aware. 1, 2, 3. Especially even when you have the two that are parallel. Okay. I'm going to do it down here where there's white underneath. 1, 2, 3. And then another circle inside of the circle. And we really cannot avoid seeing face. Can't avoid it. And so then you stop seeing the possibility of the shells or anything else, because all you see is this face. Now, I stand we have a Carrara white marbled bathroom off of our bedroom. And I get in that shower, and to loosen up my imagination, I start looking into the marble patterns to see what's there. In other words, what can I associate? And of course, like Freud says with dreams, it has to do with whatever you have been visually exposed to, your menu, usually in the previous 24 hours, 12 hours, waking hours. And so those are the sorts of images that will surface first. If you've been playing with sea otters, you're going to start to see sea otters. If you've been playing with naked people, you're going to start to see naked people. But some of that will happen anyway, because we see bodies first anyway. Faces first, bodies second, animals third, and they have a hierarchy of projection. And that's how that works looking into this. So we're trying to steer away from that, and I'm going to just drag some other colors over some of these colors with my squeegee, so I'm using it like a paintbrush too. And it does nice curves and things like that. As I play with these patterns. Oh, joy, oh, rapture. You can get ideas from this, but you're going to turn out differently here anyway, and don't force them to fit the pattern that's over there. You're going to have patterns that are going to arrive that you didn't expect. And those are the ones you want to pay attention to. It's what's arriving, not what's hoped for, but what's showing up and saying, I can work with you. Because if you're staying in the present, and you're getting very relaxed, and you're approaching flow state, you will make more and more discoveries in the paint and require less and less information from the picture or whatever else, or the scene if you're plein air painting or anything else. Because it's true from plein air painting to working with those things. All right, so here we go. Playing some more.
You did a chuckle.
Good.
I love it.
Now you can see these variegated color patterns and how much fun they are. We're just playing with the, just play, 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 play. Now, one of the other things is you realize how language changes and how even children decide to use that language in novel ways or start appropriating the language of the adults. And that's what we're doing, is we're appropriating languages from other periods and times to get these effects. Remember, and I'm going to hold up another picture so you can see where I'm coming from. So if you can say, oh, I'm going to cast my mind to this new criteria. I'm going to use this new squeegee criteria for making shell effects. I'm going to use the paper towel. I'm going to use the brushes, but we do it in language too. Now I'm changing the scale of my marks as I go back. They're smaller and I'm pressing less hard, still finding a few edges. See how those shells go up? Now I'm going to show you something from what I showed you earlier so you can see how I'm borrowing from art history and I'm seeing it show up in the paint. So I'm going to put these down and pull up this board that I used in the beginning. And I'm going to direct your attention to the Andrew Wyeth. Now you can see he's using these complementary colors. Oh, look, coincidence? I don't think so. And he's got these little marks. Look at this. This is a fingernail scratch or a knife scratch to give the indication of shells. Right there, just this little arc. And even little arcs like this. This could easily be read shell shape, or it could be read, well, there's the piece of kelp. Because when you've had the mental anchorage of saying, that's kelp, then you will continue to see kelp. And if you continue to see, well, these are little glints of light in this watercolor, then it must be shells. You'll see the shells. Okay, so now you can see that's what I'm doing up here. I'm doing something that sets up a tableau of suggestion. We want to be suggestive and let the mind's eye fill it in. The less you tell, the more participatory the brain can be. But we're compelled to explain. Rebecca and I are always compelled to explain more than we need to, so that the other person, just as parents do with children and spouses and everybody, they say, I got it. You don't go any further. That's good. And everybody does this because of this compulsion to be understood. And I'm maybe doing this here. We do it in paint. So pull up on those reins and see, take a break and walk away and see if it's working or if you're overworking the painting. And remember to go for a diversity of marks. I am trying to go for a diversity of marks. This was that point I made with Monet, saying if you find yourself with the same brush going whap, 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 with the same kind of touch, it's going to be boring for you to execute and boring for the beholder to see. Aburrido. Boring. Now I've had the advantage of all of these multitudinous different colors, which is why I didn't want to put down that acrylic first. I was going to put in this range of colors with the oil, because when I'm going to remove them, to excise them, I'm discovering something else. So we can use our fingers, and we'll move around over here. We're going to just keep working the whole surface of the painting. Now they're very small back here because of the gradient shift and scale, but remember they're also more blended. So they're really tiny out here, and that makes them go back. Sure, come right in here. What a good idea. Lamb Chop, you are an extraordinary cinematographer. Okay. Now I'm going to come up here, and it depends on how hard you touch, how much you're going to reveal, how bright the mark is going to be. And I'm going to touch, and I'm going to keep the diversity program going too, so that they're not all the same. Now you can apply paint with this too, which I probably will try to show you in just a few moments. If I pull off too much, if it's too bright, I go back over it. Let's try another bigger shell down somewhere in here. Some other kind of... I like the quality of reflected light and translucence that these transparent colors give us an opportunity to see. I'm looking at Rebecca. We're exchanging notes on conversation and volume. Okay, now look, see how they're just popping up and suggesting, just from an edge you suggest the rest. The whole idea of the shell is implied from a single edge. Now let's move across. We've been bouncing around in here. Remember, your scale is small back here, nothing big, because you're way back in the distance and they're more blended, which we can do. You can do some of that blending later. Can you see? I hope I'm not blocking. Thank you. And now you might have a shell that's down here that is going to go up higher and break into that space back there. So it's a bigger shell. And we had a lot of pattern in here, but I need some diversity in the pattern. So I'm going to go for a little more diversity in here. There. So I've got a collection there, which is much bigger than what's back there, so therefore it feels it's more in front. Now we'll quickly go to something smaller, to patterns of smaller shapes. Let's retreat to smaller shapes. Try to stand out of the way so you can see I'm working just the very edge of this squeegee. Just tickling with the edge of this squeegee. And if you listen closely to the surface of your painting, it will be giggling because you're so gentle with your tickle. Yeah, it is. Now, as I said, I'm going to put some paint on the squeegee. And if I pull very lightly, very tenderly, I can pull, and now I'm pulling from the opposite side. I was going like this, now I'm getting a reverse arc because I'm shifting sides of the picture. But you can still use that reverse arc over here. you'll make a different, this mark goes for the right hand, the left, have the hand go this way. If you're lefty, you'll do this, and then you'll do this to get different kinds of these arcs. And if you're real diversified, to get the different arcs, you'll do a big one. We'll call that the Noah's Ark. Because it has collected all the shells 2 by 2. Now you can see them gathering the lights just on the top. Why is that? Because this light is coming around like this. It's raking the top. The light is just raking the top of the surface. Whew. I'm going to go in front of you. And when you do this, you're going to be gentle. And you're going to take your time, you're breathing, you have an infinite amount of time, and you just say to yourself, like that song, gonna take a lot of love. And so here you go, gonna take a lot of love. And you have the love to give. It's your painting. Want to give it the love. We're getting bigger, we're coming down, but we can still have some smaller shapes inside with the bigger shapes. And that one's going to come up in front of that one. Remember, overlapping. Oh, overlapping's a wonderful activity. It's practically jewel-like, isn't it, when you see that light that is bouncing off the white substrate, which is why we didn't put down the acrylic underneath. The white substrate comes through the translucent colors to give them this kind of jewel-like appearance. I have not used the white except in this territory. From here up, I used some white, but below that, I didn't. And because I can get much stronger feeling of light and pattern. Now I'm going to go up and overlap some of this too with another shell. And so I'm letting shells overlap. That adds to the congestion that's there. And the nice thing about these shells is they have this aspect of roundness or ellipsis or other features. And we can be subtle with some of these marks or noisy. Some of them are dark, some of them are light. And now I'm going to come back up to you. Notice I'm working this entire, I'm down here a bit, then I go over here, then I go over here, then I go over here. Which really helps the camera operator who wants me to jump as fast as I can from one section to another section. So they can take this as a game of how fast can they refocus the camera. I'm going to be hit with a tomato momentarily. Now we'll go break that surface edge right there with some little bits catching some light up there. Now we can still go back in with colors. We're not saying you cannot go back in with color. No, I would never say that. There we go. Ooh, catching a little more of those shells out there. I want a little more ragged edge. I don't want a smooth edge. I want a little bit of a ragged edge, with a few things poking up and intruding into that territory behind it. See how they start to become a little more lumpy on that edge, a little more fractured on that edge, like a saw blade missing some teeth. And we'll do that over here too. Yeah, so you can see how I'm creating an edge that overlaps the blue background. So it creates more presence. In other words, with this bit of overlapping, these little shapes that intrude into this light blue territory, it pushes the shell bed forward. So we'll do a little bit more of that just to create more of that feeling of the shell bed is in front. And we'll find a few more lights inside of here too, because we can still have some bigger shells. Now it should already look like, because the way you manufacture an image, you'll notice I gave a shell pattern here by wiggling my squeegee. That gives that scalloped fan look. That gives a different texture pattern, which we can associate with shells. Hooray, hooray. And we'll do a little bit more. We want some to be clean. And sometimes I'm looking down here at some of these shells to get more ideas. And the more shell pictures you have around, the more ideas you'll have, because you try to develop a menu that is pretty big. And down. Overlap, overlap. There we go, so that they're stacking up. Now maybe when you stand back, you say, well, did I get carried away? Did I just do too many right there? Because I was having such a good time and inebriated with the fun of making the marks. Well, I get that way sometimes. That I'm intoxicated with how the light and the patterns can be formed and reformed. And then after a while, I'm the one in need of reforming. Okay, so I'm going to go to a different brush. A little bigger, a little smaller. Here we go, with a 1 inch, dip it into the linseed oil. And let's go to something even smaller. These are all watercolor wash brushes. I had thought at one point I'd be doing something with some bristle brushes, because I used bristle brushes on the Fiesta, the shell Fiesta painting. But no, because I thought, look, I'll give you an idea why I thought I might. I'm going to dip into this color, and let's give it a little bit of a greeny brown, and watch those textures. See how those textures are kind of fascinating. I thought, well, maybe I'll be able to use those textures. But I'm looking at the painting and saying, no, I don't think so. So now I'm going to find some violet shadows, and we'll make some opaques. It's come to this between you and me. We're finally going to make some opaques for this lower level. This is the lower level where you'll find housewares. Sometimes wonder if there'll still be department stores after all of this is done. We've been moving away from them. I'm going, oh, look at that. All right, so we're going to go put a darker shape right here that's going to overlap that shape. Do you see how that pushed that shell back? Whoa, fun. And we'll try a few others so we can push some shells around. And I'm going up. Now I'm going to go to this Quinacridone Fuchsia. And I went to the Quinacridone Fuchsia thinking I might be able to get a different kind of violet. And now I'll add white to this to get a very pastel violet. Now, in the first shell painting I showed you, there were a lot of pastels. Well, that's how I used it. So the first shell painting had the pastels, which was white in the colors, and the second one was more primary colors. Now we're back into this, and we're going to find out if we can get a little more pastel and get some other different texture patterns there. See how pretty that looks. You're just playing, and you're having such a good time playing when your mother calls you don't want to come indoors. I don't care if it's lunchtime. I wonder where that came from. There's a violet shadow living inside of the shell. Oh, that's so tasty. And maybe I'll try something in here with some of those violet shadows. There we go. I don't even know. Maybe I'll try it in here, right in here. Something a little bit violet picks it up a little bit. Could you have more fun? You're playing with color complements. You're taking those light pastel colors and putting them against complementary pastel colors to make the picture have some vibrancy. Give it electricity. It's electric. There, that little bit of that pastel there. Now we're going to go a little deeper at the bottom, so it's a double-loaded brush, even in a very small area. There. Look at that. Oh my God, this is fun. And I feel like if I were Bob Ross right now, I'd be talking to you about making happy little shells, because it's so much fun. Any color that's too dark, I think I need a pastel shadow, I come in and go for the pastel shadow. You see, I went up for that pastel violet shadow right in there because it was so dark. Bah. So we're going to do that again because it's just so fun. Looking these yellows and these violets together. We're going to just try a few more of those violets back in here, especially against that yellow shell. And you could see when I dial down the color with the violets that it's giving me more space and it's giving more luminosity, because shadows don't go black, they scale toward indigo violet and all of the steps in between. So I'm back over here. Now this is getting a little brown and muddy. See how it's getting a little brown? Because it's picking up yellows from inside of the painting. So I'm going to rejuvenate my pastel bath over in here. So I'm going to take some white, a little bit of oil. We're doing this to taste. A little bit of the Scheveningen blue light, and we'll just take that up to here. Scheveningen blue light. A little bit more Scheveningen blue light. It's opaque, it dies fast. And then a little bit of the Quinacridone Fuchsia on the end of your finger. Somehow, I don't know how, but these colors end up on the kitchen counter and on the kitchen cabinets. I have no idea. All I can think of is Rebecca is unwittingly walking around the studio, picking up these colors and letting them show up there. She thinks it's me. Now you can see me making a pastel violet again. Look how much cleaner that violet is. Oh, so pretty. Yes, we mix this Quinacridone Fuchsia with white and Scheveningen blue light. And we got deeper violet, lighter violet, all kinds of violet. In Johannesburg, they call these African violets. Now I'm going to put some of those pale violets back here because it's going to give you more atmosphere in the background. Look at that. See that atmosphere is moving into the background, the violets? So we can keep these shadow colors lighter, which carries us deeper into that space. And so I'm going to do that to a few more in here and up in here too, so we can get a little more of that action and look at those lively colors as a result. Boom, 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 boom. Isn't that fun to see those fields of blue-violet start to show up? It's just uncanny, the joy you can take from color. It's edible. It's tasty. In this case, I'm looking for something that has good mouthfeel. And there they go with some of that Scheveningen blue light that's here is getting introduced into the rocks, which helps give me a color conversation between some areas. We want that conversation so that we have unity. Oh boy, and unity is so nice. I come down here with a little bit of that blue down in there, and down in here, and down up to there, pushing it around. So you get that color that's back there coming up front and living in the shadows. So we've got a lot of depth down in here in these dark colors. Let's pull some other of the blues back into here. And so we're trying to keep rhythm going too. So we've got these patterns of there's the arc, and then we're going from bigger to smaller, then I'm creating these little rhythmic patches, these, and if you've got rhythm and you've got the blues, you've got rock and roll. Got rhythm and you get the blues. And now I'm putting more violets in here, as you see. Some violets. So we went away because look at this, ultramarine blue and the Scheveningen blue light with white. The ultramarine blue has a touch of red in it, so it gives you a little bit of that. Now I'm getting a little more of the deeper pastel from over here. See that? I'm going for the pool of deeper violet there. The limpid pool of deeper violet. That's what we want, a little limpid pool here. You always hear about the limpid pool in people's eyes in romance novels, right? Now we're going to find another, let's try a shape that overlaps in there, and there, and there, and there, and there, and there. Boomity boom boom. Look at those. See the variety. Oh, the variety. Somehow I said that like I was narrating the Hindenburg blimp disaster. Oh, the humanity. Oh, the variety. Which you don't want to make light of because that was such a catastrophe. But there we are, bringing some of those blues farther forward. Look at how much variety, variegated color there is, as well as the lights and darks. Now, I've been doing that with my lavender brush. And I'm looking around at it and I'm saying, you know what? We could use an amber brush. So let's look through the collection and see if we find an amber brush or a brush capable of delivering amber. So I'm going to pull up my sleeve, gather a new and fresh set of paper towels because they like the paint and the brushes and all the rest are free. But these days you want to keep a nice stock of them available to you. Now I'm going to put amber, or Gamboge, with a little white on it, on this half inch, this is a half inch brush. And I'm going to let it pitch around in here and give me a sense of some other kind of color. And so I can just soften some of the glaring spots a little bit. And then I wiped off the brush in between with my paper towel. And I'm going to go back up into here and find some other light spots. Do you see that? I just went flick, flick, flick. You want to flick. It means you're going to have an uninhibited gesture. And uninhibited gestures, the freedom of the uninhibited gesture is something we've been celebrating in paint for a long time. Deleuze writes about it with Frans Hals. That's what Manet enjoys about Velázquez. That's what we enjoy about Tintoretto's work, Titian's work, Rembrandt's work. That relaxed gesture, creating energy in the painting through the gesture that the hand left behind. And it's a gesture that has the capability of suggestion. It implies, oh, a lace collar. Oh, the reflection on the hilt of a sword or whatever. There we are. So here we go. A little more of that bright light back in here. Just some of those, and we'll bring it back with the white, bring it back a little bit white, and just see if we can maybe put a little bit more. See that? A pop. Now I'm popping opaques back there, and look at how that takes you back. It carries you back. It carries you back toward the water and Old Virginia, which is just down the coast. Next thing you know, you're in Norfolk. There, see how they're catching that light right there? We're going to do a little bit more of that. And you want to do this a little bit. Keep them in patches like flowers, you know, they're clusters. But also, it's always good to spread the light. Don't you think? Somewhere in here needs a little bit of more light. There, bumpity bum bum. See that? I did a cluster. Let's take a little bit more of this white. Mix it with some vermilion, which will give us a different kind of brightness. Now we're not just using the amber that we see here with the Gamboge. We've got a hot, soft coral from the vermilion. So we're taking a little bit of this Gamboge, mixing it maybe a little bit of this. It's a hot color, but it's been desaturated with some white. But it's not the color of the amber that I was putting down. It's a little toastier. And I'm going to see if I need a little bit of that toast right down there. Oh, isn't that nice? Just a little bit of toast right there. Still remember my grandfather loving those English muffins. And I was just wishing my great uncle a happy 84th birthday. And they live in assisted living. And his wife said he's kind of complaining because they have everything, all our meals, and it's all wonderful, and you order from a menu, and it's terrific, and it's mostly Cornellians up where they're living in this place, and there's even a Nobel laureate down the hall because there's all these Cornellians. But when they go to, they can order some food, or they can just go out and buy some, and she goes out to buy some because he likes those Thomas's English muffins with, with raisins or something? Some cranberry something in them, which he can't get. And I thought, now that's funny. Your father, my grandfather, who was born in the 1890s, when those things came along, it was all of a sudden he'd found paradise. Thomas's English muffins. Now we're putting in some of this pink right here, and I made it hot. And you can see those hot colors down here. Hot, hot, hot. And we're going to try a little bit of that heat right here onside that edge, because that one edge was too close to the same quality of this edge, but now it's got some of that heat. And we'll try a little bit of it over here. In here, we need a little heat. Right there, and maybe a little bit right here. Just a little glow. So we can have it, and look at how it pops against those blues. Oh my God, this vermilion. Remember what I said about complementary colors? What do? They modify the adjacent color. In other words, when they're together and that vermilion goes next to that ultramarine blue, what happens? The ultramarine blue becomes bluer and the vermilion redder. And that's because they're juxtaposed, simultaneous contrast. It happens in your eye and your cortex picks it up. And it's very exciting. There are a few more of those. Boogity boom, boom, boom. And, well, now you step back, see, evaluate. I don't have enough heat back here. Need some heat in the back. When I stepped back, I had the epiphany. I did not have the epiphany up here because when I'm working up here, I'm only doing what my eyes will allow me to do. I can focus about a small area, which is why I work over the whole painting, so that I will have a harmony. But when I'm focusing in one area, I don't see the rest of the painting. Only if the painting is this big do I see the whole painting. So I have to step back, and now the painting that was this big becomes, watch as I step back, becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And when it gets to be this small, which is what it is right now, that's how big the painting is right now when I'm standing at this distance, just like your face, up close within 8 inches of the mirror is half the size of a face. You don't think of it that way because you think you're looking at your face. So now we're going to come in here because it gets smaller and smaller as you step back. Unless your face is pressed against the mirror, it's not actual size. So now we've made this, we've got this hotter color, and we're going to put some of that up against the blue because it's complementary. See how it's getting that red heat up there at the top, and it's a color complement to that blue, and it starts to make the whole thing sizzle. You can hear the sizzle. And since you can hear the sizzle, you probably want where the sizzle is coming from. It's coming from your sizzle stick. This is your sizzle stick. And here we go with some more heat. Right down, right, I think that should be a little hotter right there. And not quite as bright, but just a little hotter because it was moving too far forward. Let's try it again. I'm coming in, I hope I'm not blocking terribly. There, just catch a little bit of light there. And now we're going to go with that same, you see I'm going to the Gamboge, the white, and the vermilion. And I'm looking at my brush before I touch. Look at your brush before you touch. B before T. And I'm looking here and I'm thinking I could use a kind of a glowing shape in here and maybe one there. Oop, got two eyeballs right there and there. That didn't work. So we'll go back and create some more stuff moving back and retreating into there. And I was trying to get the light up here, and as I see how wonderful the red heat is, I keep trying to put some of it more down here because it's so much fun. It seems so delectable. It's just like saying, you know, I think I could eat one more brownie and not be in trouble. Well, you're wrong, of course. As they say about cruise ships, I listened to this with Rick Steves the other day. We gain a pound a day on average on a cruise ship. Isn't that an interesting statistic? Or when tasty food is free and abundant, and you've got no really other place to go, you can see what we turn into Wally World. All right, a little more light right there. Right there. Now we've got some of the toast happening up there. And I'm going to make sure that I have a little more of that color contrast against right in there. I'm really going to push that heat up right there. Look at that. And against that blue, it's pretty toasty. More heat. There, that's more fun. Those reds are just so... Now let's try some real hot reds before we take some of this off. Okay, so what do we do for a real hot red? Do we need a bigger brush? Maybe so. So that would mean a 1-inch brush. Do I have one at the ready? Well, I have a 3/4 inch, which is pretty good. And here it is, pure, undiluted, bright vermilion. Now that's pretty hot. What's going to happen? We don't know. Think about it before you do it. Ooh, that is, look at how hot and juicy that is. Any place else? Maybe right down here. There's some more heat. Look at that, what it does to the color, just a few little bits. There's a story that John Constable and others told about Turner. And maybe you saw the movie on Turner, or maybe not. But if you did, you remember he had this kind of gray painting, a seascape, and everybody, because it was varnishing day, and everybody had come around to tell John Constable, you've beat him now. Your picture is more exciting than Turner's. You've done it. You finally knocked him out of the ring with your Bridge at Waterloo Crossing. Except John Constable himself said, there, see the heat, said, I'm not so fast, guys. This is Turner we're talking about. And on varnishing days, he comes in and does something. And turns this painting, whatever painting it is, into something that explodes with a new force. And he hasn't come yet. Oh, there he is now. He's coming into the salon. It's varnishing day. He's going to do something to his painting. And they gather around and go, well, what could he do? Don't worry, John, you got this guy licked. And he comes up to the painting and he puts a red buoy, a bright vermilion red buoy in the painting. And I'm thinking of his bright red buoy right now when I'm putting in some of the colors that you see me putting in now. So that I can pop something else. I'll probably put something, and he puts that in, And he steps back and walks away, and everyone has to acknowledge, you know, he's got a more exciting painting now. And Constable said, and he's quoted even in the movie, but many other places, yes, Turner showed up and he fired a gun. Boom. And that's what we want to do, is we want to have the fun of firing the gun. And that's what I'm trying to do right now through the color contrast, just as Turner did on that varnishing day at the Royal Academy. Now I'm pushing, see how that helps push this shell up? That dark pushes the shell up. There, we're going to push, 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 push. And we're going to add a little dark back here because it's going to do the same thing. There, see how it pushes that shell up, up, up through the dark, through the contrast? No, you've got this contrast idea down now. You're getting pretty good. Now I'm pushing, look at that shell. It's just deciding to pop up. Now I'm going to take the squeegee and come back over here to this one and go, what about you? You're going to come up and out. And we'll come down now from this side and down. And now, you see there's a crispy edge that's catching the light, and underneath the crispy light edge is this yellow, which I drag with my squeegee so that it'd feel like it's a little bit of a concavity, but it's catching light. So it's also started to pop up. Now I'm going to drag this very gently right there so that I changed the stain. The yellow stain that's on the shadow is now changed and migrating into this more a little browner yellow right over there. Oh! And now we're going to take a little edge and put another edge right there. Right there, so we can pop up another shell right there. What about on this one? Can we pop a little light on the edge of this? This is tricky and fun. There, just look at that edge and how that little edge, a little edge information, our brain takes that and goes all the way to Kentucky when it gets that little bit of edge information. And that's what I'm doing again. Where I was in the beginning, finding little bits of edge information so that we can feel this overlapping, this forest of luminous and exciting shapes. So exciting. There we go, a little bigger one right there. Do you see that? It's a gesture. Don't ponder, go for the gesture. Put an idea in your hand, let her rip. There's another bigger shell right there. And right there, maybe, right there. And anybody else? Anybody? 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 Going once, going twice, come on. There we go. Okay, good, good. There we go, another one. Boom, boom. All right. It's coming up on 1 o'clock. I can't wait to get the critiques, but let's take the tape off and see what happens when we isolate what we've done so far on this oil on paper with seashells with a raking light, complementary high contrast color. Have to take this glove off so I can secure the board. And there we go, so that we can see the window on space that it claims to be. And I'm going to step aside so you can see how we can do shells on the shore. Super fun.